a standard 12.8 millimeter socket fits on these bolts. And earlier it looked like these were separate pieces and you only have to take off the end pieces, but that's not true. These right here are spot welds, these four. So that's just a different sheet metal part underneath that's welded to this top plate. So all 8 of these bolts do have to come out to take this plate off, but theoretically when you broke the oil pan loose, you pried it up, this is still bolted down. So in theory, your surface underneath this bearing plate did not have the RTV, the original RTV from the factory, broken apart. You just have to. My only concern really is the half moon seals at the end here, to where if some RTV got pulled out from just underneath that, and now it's compromised. So I'm thinking, unfortunately, the right way to do this is to take out these 8 bolts and pull this plate up and have a lot more scraping to do. You know, you got to clean 4 surfaces instead of 2 then, and RTV 4 places instead of 2 pretty much if you're undoing this. But I already took off the oil pickup. But yeah, if anyone else, drop a comment if you know that with a VVT engine, if you can actually just leave the oil pickup on with this main bearing support plate and just pop the oil pan off, replace the half moon seals, still, you know, RTV it underneath and on top, and then just clean this surface here on each side and RTV over that, and just put the oil pan back on. If that's an acceptable method or not, I'm not sure. Let me know if you know. All right, so that actually wasn't really hard at all. Just took those 8 bolts out and put a little flathead screwdriver underneath the edge, and it pried up extremely easy without much force. I was a little worried because searching the Google last night and just trying to find some threads. Majority of the threads I found were like from Protege forums that have the main bearing support plate. Barely anything pops up for people talking about removing them from the Mazda Miatas. The only posts I really found were people doing like turbo builds where they went with ARP studs on the bottom of the connecting rods, and the stud sticks up a little higher, so they actually have to modify this plate to allow the caps. Actually, I believe it's these here, the main bearing bolts that hold it down right there. I believe they make those into studs and put a nut on them, and the stud sticks out farther than the head of this bolt. So they actually have to cut out or drill out pieces of this so they can pass through. Not the case with what I'm doing. I'm just literally just trying to reseal the pan. So not nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be to get off, because reading online on the Protege forum, people said they were stuck trying for 3 days to get this thing off, but they actually probably had more bolts that were hidden behind the transmission they're talking about on this side that kind of held the main bearing support plate down. So on the 1.8 VVT Miata engine, there's none of that really. It's just the 8 bolts on top, pries right up. And I'm actually pretty surprised to see how clean this surface is. I thought there'd be a lot of RTV stuck to it, but looks like most of the RTV stuck to the support plate itself. So this will be a lot less work to clean up the block side, which is the way I'd want it to be, because I don't want to get any crud down into the bottom of the piston, the cylinder walls down there. But everything looks pretty clean on this engine for 170,000 miles almost. So go ahead now and just get everything cleaned up and apply a bead of RTV to, I believe they say to do it to the bottom of that, and then apply that on here, torque the bolts down, and then apply a bead of RTV onto the oil pan, and then set the half moon seals with the RTV underneath them and on top of them. There's a million videos on YouTube showing exactly how to do that process, so I'm not going to get into detail repeating any of that, but hopefully this extra footage not really talked about on YouTube yet is helping some of you guys out there. Okay, so I just spent some time getting the oil pan and MBSP super clean, scrubbing with green Scotch-Brite on these surfaces, getting everything adhesive free, oil free. Took a long time to clean out the inside of the pan. Took the baffle plate off the pan, and then both sides of the MBSP are ready for sealant now. I'm just going to do one final wipe down with everything with isopropyl alcohol before I do actually apply the RTV. Same thing with the engine here. This was actually the easiest surface to clean, but I had like rags stuffed down along the crank so that no debris would fall in there, or at least minimal debris. This is ready for a final wipe down, and then the process to reinstall. The only thing that's not really called out in the owner's manual is the bolt torque for the baffle plate that you hold down. So I'm going to try to do a little research on that. So I'm going to drop the baffle back in just like this. And for the bolts, I'm going to use a little blue Loctite just for peace of mind. The threads came out super dry, so maybe it had some type of Loctite on them from the factory, but there's really no torque spec for these in the OEM manual, the service manual. So I found a thread online for the NC Miata baffle, and they said to do it between 80 and 90 foot-pounds. So I'm gonna go ahead and do 85 to split the difference.